Good morning or good afternoon, or wherever you are. It's Matt Coleman, your host from Magnify World. As you know, in a series that we have over the next couple of months, we are interviewing the top 50 most interesting companies in the world that we can find in the AR, VR, AI and emerging technology space. And we've got a very special guest today, Martina Welkhoff, who is the founding partner of the WXR Fund. How are you, Martina?
I'm doing well, Matt. Thanks for having me.
So you're up in Seattle, right? So
I am.
How's it going up there?
It's a hot summer up here. We're gonna break 80 again today, but it's beautiful. I can't complain.
So Seattle's a bit of a hotbed for technology, of course, with Amazon being its hometown and various other companies, right? Why is that? And were you born there? Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how, the WXR Fund came to be?
Sure, yeah. So I was not born here. I was born in Canada. So shout out to any of my fellow Canadians out there listening. I'm a Saskatoon girl. But I've lived in Seattle for over 10 years now. This is where I founded my first company in 2009. And I can say from that firsthand experience, Seattle is a great place to start a tech startup. We have an amazing concentration of talent here. And I think that does, go back to Microsoft and some of the other tech giants that have been established here. And it's an amazing quality of life. It's a really lovely place to live. A lot of people up here enjoy the access to outdoor recreation, and there's a lot of interesting culture in the city. So I found it to be a great place to find talent, to build ventures. And the ecosystem is still young compared to the Bay Area, but we have a critical mass of investors who are always growing, and increasingly more capital coming from the Bay Area and other geographies as well. So it's kind of got all the raw ingredients for a great tech hub.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it reminds me of what they're trying to do in Silicon Beach here in Los Angeles, where I'm speaking from, right? There's, the Playa Vista area is a burgeoning startup scene with lots of new WeWorks and buildings and everything over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. But Seattle's had that for a lot longer. So you've definitely got a great ecosystem, as you said. So tell us a little bit more around what you invest in and how did you found the fund? Is it with local investment, or is it more nationally, or how's it all come to be?
So it's very much national. At WXR, we invest in women-led spatial computing companies at the seed stage. So what we mean by spatial computing is augmented and virtual reality, as well as artificial intelligence as it relates to the 3D computing paradigm. So it's a bit bigger than what we think about just in terms of AR, VR categories today, but also includes technologies like computer vision, natural language processing, everything that is necessary to power that 3D paradigm. And we started, so I'll rewind to 2017. My first company got acquired in 2016, and around that time, a lot of people in the gaming world in Seattle, which was the community I was very much a part of, were migrating into VR. The Rift and Vive dev kits had just shipped. There was a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of curiosity about the space. And I got caught up in that wave of, this is really exciting to get in at the ground floor of something so new. Of course, VR, goes much further back than just this most recent wave, but, at least in terms of the current technology, it was the beginning of that hype cycle. And I started a social production company experimenting with social scenarios, creating shared memory, what it could look like to really build a community and shared experience in VR. And through that studio, which is called Convene VR, I ended up connecting with a few key people, namely Abby Albright and Malia Probst, who became my co-founders in WXR, as well as Marco De Moraz of the Venture Reality Fund and Tipitach Navasan, who became some of our first investors. And we found a lot of commonalities in our thinking about building an inclusive foundation for the industry, and how, if we were to prioritize women in leadership and making sure that women-led companies got funding early on, that the ripple effect of that over time could be quite profound. And so that was essentially the premise, is we have this window of time where we can have outsized influence with our investment dollars, both economically and in terms of the way that shapes the industry. And that's ultimately what convinced me to make the leap from entrepreneur to funder, and really decide to leverage the next chapter of my career focused on funding other companies versus building my own, which was a whole existential process I went through. Of course, I still consider myself an entrepreneur at heart, but I find a great deal of joy now in getting to support other entrepreneurs and make sure that they're adequately resourced.
So Martina, tell us about the company, the gaming company you were involved with that you exited, and what did they do, and who did you sell it to?
Yeah, so that was called Zealist. It was a really unique gaming platform in that we were B2B. So, the vast majority of gaming companies, of course, are B2C, but we were actually selling into mostly Fortune 500 companies to foster a stronger employee culture and feed data back to employers. So how it worked is we would match employees on teams of 6, and that was based on the criteria employees provided as well as goals that their employer had for the engagement. And then on these teams, they would play games that were designed to help them foster relationships and network, as well as learn about the company. And in turn, it collected quite a bit of feedback for employers and could sort of supplement employee surveys and some of the other data that employers were looking at to better understand their company culture. We actually ended up being acquired by the University of Washington. So a very atypical deal in that it was acquired into an academic institution. The Foster School, the Center for Leadership and Strategic Thinking there, is now commercializing it in higher ed. So they're selling into other higher ed institutions. And they were our only higher ed customer and our core research partner. So we had a long-standing close relationship with them. And it's been exciting to see what they've done with it, taking it in a different direction.
And tell me just a little bit more about the background of the other female founders of the fund. I think that's important, and what sort of experience that they bring to the table, and what's their strength.
Yes, definitely. And I should mention as well that there's been an addition. Amy Lemire has joined the team, so I'll talk about her as well. So Malia Probst is a partner at VR Scout. Some of your listeners may be familiar with it. Yes, so she comes from the media world and is an incredible storyteller and connector, and still at VR Scout. So she's a venture partner for us now in industry, looking for great companies. Abby Albright is also a venture partner. She is currently at Activision, and she got her MBA at Wharton, and prior to that was an early employee at Daiquiri. So she has that early startup experience on the AR hardware side. And then, went to a top business school and is now in the gaming world, again, in industry, that have boots on the ground for us. And then Amy Lemire is my co-managing partner. And Amy was actually a mentor in our very first cohort of the WXR Accelerator. And she was just a superstar. And I sort of organically asked her to get more and more involved over the course of a year, and eventually asked her to join me as a managing partner and raise the fund. And thankfully she accepted. So she and I are working very closely on building the fund now. And she was at Akamai for over a decade. She was primarily leading M&A there. So she did actually close to $2 billion in deals while she was at Akamai. So she brings that corporate perspective of what does the exit look like from the acquirer perspective, and I kind of have the 0 to 1 entrepreneur mindset, and so she and I are very complementary in that when we're thinking about a company and evaluating any investment, she's thinking, okay, what does the exit look like? I'm thinking, how do we build from 0 to 1, and we can tag team really nicely when we're counseling companies.
That's excellent. Thanks for that. And look, I do want to talk about your relationship with the Verizon 5G lab and virtual worlds and digital twins and smart glasses later on in the conversation. But while you just touched on, entrepreneurs and what potentially you're looking for, I mean, what are the key drivers from your perspective outside of the exit you mentioned that you'd like to see in the seed range of funding here? And can you explain that to the viewers? What are the key drivers?
Yeah, definitely. So we're investing so early. We're often, first institutional capital in after friends and family. So of course the idea is important. Of course the technology and any metrics that are available are all important. And I don't want to diminish all of that being sort of fundamental. But what I'm most focused on when I'm evaluating team, assuming they kind of check the basic criteria we're looking for in terms of the opportunity and the technology, is the team. It's really about the team. It's really about, are these the people we want to bet on to build out this vision? Because as I know firsthand, building a startup is incredibly difficult. It's probably one of the most difficult endeavors a human can embark on. And you need a really high degree of resilience. You need a really high degree of motivation and enthusiasm on a team, and that passion and dedication cannot be fabricated. It has to be real. It has to be at the core of everything that you're doing. And so I look for great leadership from the CEO and the rest of the executive team. I love to see that the executive team has worked together before. So if they've built companies together before, if they're coming out of a company where they've overcome challenges together before, all of that is helpful in gauging their ability to stay cohesive and stay strong as a team. And I'm ultimately looking for the right people to solve the right problem. And so we want to see a high degree of domain expertise. We love to see founders who have experienced the problem that they're solving and really, really understand the market that they're tackling. So they have the network, they have the deep knowledge in order to really build a competitive advantage over time.
And is revenue important at this stage, do you think? I know some companies would have revenues, but some probably don't, depending on the product, of course. I mean, how do you evaluate a non-revenue company versus something that is someone that's done $250,000 to $1 million in sales?
Right. Yeah. So it certainly can be, and that's where it depends very much on the model and the sector. It's oftentimes more important in a B2B model where we want to see that their customers are indeed willing to pay and ideally willing to get beyond the pilot stage, because oftentimes in B2B sales, you can get caught in what my friend Tipatat says is pilot purgatory. I love that phrase. That's a real danger for early stage startups. On the consumer side, sometimes revenue is less important. Sometimes what we're looking for there is just engagement metrics and a clear. In either case, what we're really looking for is clear evidence that there's ability to scale. And so we want to see beyond just sort of the initial curiosity novelty stage, where people might download an app because it's new, or they might sign a pilot engagement because why not? It's low barrier to entry. We want to see that beyond that there's sticking power and there's the ability to grow. And so there's a lot of ways to tell that story. Revenue is great, and it's one of the key metrics that if you have it, it always puts you in a better position as an entrepreneur to have more traction, to have more data that you can point to and build out that story versus just the story and vision alone. But a lot of times the user engagement and being able to, demonstrate a low churn and a high virality, those sorts of things, especially on the consumer side, are quite important as well.
So tell us more about your relationship with Verizon. Obviously 5G, new high-speed technologies coming to the consumers and the business world rapidly at the moment. I've never seen so many 5G ads, although it's still not here ultimately. Yep. in its powerful capacity. I mean, tell us more about what you're doing with Verizon in the music and entertainment sectors.
Yeah, we've had a fantastic partnership with Verizon going on 2 years now. And we ran an accelerator in 2018 and 2019. And last year in 2019, Verizon 5G Labs actually underwrote the whole program. They were a core partner for that. So we've been working with them both on designing the accelerator programming and providing a lot of resources to those accelerator companies through Verizon channels, as well as public programming. Increasingly this year in particular, with the pandemic, we've been doing a lot of public programming and experimentation in virtual reality, which has been a ton of fun. And I think, it kind of pushed the envelope in terms of what we're trying to produce in VR, which is really exciting. The relationship between 5G and XR is quite symbiotic in that obviously 5G, when fully realized, will be when, XR can be ubiquitous and accessible. So that's key to kind of realizing the potential of these technologies. And in the same way, 5G, XR is the killer use case for 5G. Right now, a lot of what we use our phones for, what we use technology for, 4G is fine. What 4G did for video streaming, 5G can do for XR. And so the partnership is great in that sense that, Verizon's looking for great new companies. They're really looking to support the startup ecosystem, and they've put a lot of resources out into startup ecosystems around the world. And so we help them to find and identify those companies where there's a lot of potential impact, and figure out both on the technical pipeline and in other resource capacities how we can set them up for success, such that they're growing hand in hand and ready for the moment where both 5G and XR are ready for prime time.
I remember, I think it was not this year, but last year's CES, of course. Come to think of it, where Verizon had their top 10 companies that they were profiling, and that were powering 5G. I'm not sure whether you were there, but that's kind of like the feeder network you were talking about there. They're actually investing in those companies to a degree. I'm not sure whether it's an equity play or whether it's pure sponsorship to actually drive the technology even further. Can you tell us a little bit more about what they're doing financially with these companies?
Yeah, so last year they ran the Built on 5G challenge. That was their most public-facing funding effort. And the winner of that actually had $1 million investment from Verizon. And then there were several runners-up that had, I think the range was between 100 and 500K additional investment. So they're definitely, investing real capital, and beyond that also in-kind resources. So there's all sorts of technical support, as well as access to executives and various perks that come with those programs that are very helpful for the startups that participate. And then Verizon Ventures is doing direct investing as well in the space. So that's separate but complementary to the 5G Labs efforts.
Excellent. And was there a music fan experience or a virtual world that they were exploring, or you're exploring, that I was reading about?
We've been hosting a variety of events, and one was on emerging fan experiences. We actually hosted that in Mozilla Hubs. So what we've been doing is tackling both a core subject area that's interesting, like virtual twins was another one you alluded to, and then building an event around that subject in a virtual world, in some kind of virtual platform. And so the music event, Amy, my business partner, was actually the moderator for that. She's a total music nut. She, before the pandemic, she was going to multiple shows a week, and is very much immersed in that world. And we had some great speakers. I don't know if you're familiar with Tribe XR. That was one of the companies presenting, and they have an immersive DJ school where they've actually been able to teach people to DJ entirely in VR. And then when these people get to a physical turntable, they're able to DJ like a pro from the virtual reality training. And so that was when we had a dance party after that event. Actually, one of their virtual DJs came in. It was so much fun, and we just transformed Hubs into a dance club in the middle of the day, basically, using Tribe XR's program. And we've been talking to a variety of people, creating different kinds of event experiences. So we have one coming up, actually, that's going to be hosted in a new platform called Pixel Canvas. And this is a group of game developers who early in the pandemic saw that there were the need for different kinds of virtual events was going to be a really important place to focus over the next year. So they pivoted to create a high fidelity 3D immersive environment, but it's actually designed more like a PC desktop game than for a VR headset. So it's more accessible in this moment where not as many people have VR headsets. And then they've leveraged some video conference technology on top of that. So you can have a sort of spontaneous experience where you're exploring a 3D environment and also able to break out and mingle and have face-to-face discussions via video conference, but in a more organic kind of serendipitous way, like you would networking at a real event. So we're going to be testing an event. This is my plug. We're doing an event with them on August 26th. We're actually hosting a Women in XR Summit on Pixel Canvas. So inviting women and allies from all over the industry to come into this beautiful space they've designed for us. We're going to be featuring a bunch of women-led companies, as well as some projects through the Kaleidoscope Femme Futures program. And there'll be a lot of different companies to check out, some live showcases, and then also discussion groups where you can pop in and learn about anything from fundraising to design to education, and really get to network with your peers.
Well, that sounds amazing. I actually did my first pre-production interview in a VR room last week with your friends at Pluto, actually.
Yes.
I think I was telling you, so I finally did the pre-production and our interviews this week. But it is certainly a surreal experience when I said, can't we just do this interview on Mars or somewhere else? Because this whole environment is a green screen, potentially, if it's not animated or pre-designed, right?
Yeah,
so
yes.
it's wild.
Infinite possibility.
Yeah, no, it was great. I really enjoyed that. So tell us, what stage are you looking at companies to invest in right now from female founders? And can they submit their material to you through the website?
We are, yes. Yeah. So you can reach out to us via the website. The contact us form will go right to my inbox. So that's an easy way to reach us. Mm-hmm. And we are mostly, like I said, investing in seed. So we do like to see a product in some degree of traction. We're not generally investing just at the idea stage. So we like to see it a little bit further along and built out. But I would say it's never too early to reach out and start establishing that relationship. So even if you're not actively raising, if you want to hop on a call and talk about what you're doing, and we can kind of give you more specific input on what we're looking for, sometimes that's helpful. Even before you're at the seed stage. But seed is really our sweet spot. So generally the companies have raised, like I said, a little bit of friends and family or bootstrapped to a point where they have, a working product and some metrics around that can then build the story for that next round of funding. Excellent.
And let's talk about then the future of education. I know that's a bit of a hot topic in the healthcare market, and I want to talk about the future of shopping. They're the three areas. Would you like to tackle education first, and how you see in this crazy market that, we were talking before around, the top tier universities may be all right, but it's the second tier and third tier, and even the private college market, because all their students have either gone home or shut down, and whether they can hold out, this turmoil at the moment financially is another question. I mean, I think VR and AR is another interesting tool to introduce to the market. Everyone that I've been talking to said that there is a higher impact right now in this sector. So you're probably doing this at the right time, Martina, from your side, but also from the other side. The drivers are even larger. So how do you see the education market moving forward with what you're doing and what's possible?
Yeah, so I think education is one of those places where it's a perfect marriage of AR, VR, and AI, in that spatial learning is so powerful, and there's more and more research and studies emerging on this every day. But essentially, if basic learning theory is you sort of retain the least when you're just listening, and then as you get closer and closer to actively engaging, whether that's through additional visuals or ideally what VR can afford, and AR as well in some cases, is getting to practice whatever it is you're learning, getting to be fully immersed and doing versus just passively absorbing. And so that's the real opportunity with VR and AR, is with those immersive technologies, you can put someone in the driver's seat of their learning experience, and the retention of whatever it is they're learning goes much, much, much higher than if it was just a traditional sort of lecture setting, for example, and contrasting those paradigms. And so even prior to the pandemic, there was a very strong argument for why adopting these technologies and coupling them with traditional classroom methodology would be very powerful. But now, of course, when physical classrooms are not as accessible, or in some cases not accessible at all, this is a much more powerful way for a student to learn remotely than some of the options, just video conferencing currently being used. And then when you couple that with artificial intelligence and the possibility for personalized learning, this is where I think it gets very, very exciting. Because even at a very young age, well-trained AI can start to understand a specific student's strengths and a specific student's learning style and cater the curricula to that student versus trying to have a one-size-fits-all kind of mentality. Because of course, we're all unique as human beings. We all have different ways of learning and different ways of finding success. And AI can really help to make sure that the most students have the highest likelihood of succeeding in learning a given topic. An example of this is a company that went through our accelerator back in 2018 called Alchemy, and they're building chemistry and physics education tools in AR and VR. And as someone who went through organic chemistry myself in undergrad, I can attest to the difficulty of those subjects. And I believe organic chemistry actually has one of the highest failure rates across the board. It's a very difficult topic to tackle. But with the spatial tools Alchemy has been able to build, and the gamification that they use, so it's a more engaging, more intuitive way to learn than traditional methods that are available. They've been able to significantly increase improve student outcomes and make it fun and make it appealing to a broader range of students that might not otherwise gravitate to the sciences. And so that's one example out of many, many, many where we're seeing I would say to some extent democratization of education, in that a lot of these subject areas that were perhaps not as accessible for a lot of the population can now, there's new pathways to find success in learning. And then the other piece of that, which is newer, and this is more pandemic specific, is the social piece. And so people tend to think of, a lot of the fear I hear around VR is that it's isolating. You're putting this box on your head and you're alone in this virtual world. And what if you never come out? This is the fear I hear from parents. It's, what if I give this to my adolescent and he just disappears and I lose him to the virtual world? And that's a separate conversation. But what I always try to help people to see is that VR can be incredibly social. In fact, I think that's the best way to experience VR. And honestly, it's what's kept me sane during the pandemic, is that I can get together with people like Forrest from Pluto in VR, and we can build shared memories and can have shared experiences. And when you think about education and collaboration and filling the social purpose that school serves, as well as just learning the material itself, you can bring students together and you can build together and you can have a sense of shared presence that simply isn't possible with just video technology. And so right now, when students unfortunately aren't able to get together and aren't able to share a space with their teachers, VR offers a platform where they can get closer to that, and in some cases can do what would not be possible in the classroom, like visiting Mars or taking a field trip to Egypt. And those sorts of things are very, very exciting to me as well.
Do you ever see a time where these immersive technologies will take over the classroom and most schooling will be done at home, particularly if this future pandemics aren't solved? I mean, they're talking about the live music business not recovering for 3 years, and they don't even know if there's going to be a third wave or a fourth wave or a fifth wave. How it's impossible to see the future in that far out, maybe, but even if we look at 10 years out, there's got to be different forms of communication. There's the new smart glasses, which the mixed reality glasses, which would make it more appealing for students, I think, and more comfortable to wear, as well as the larger headsets as the computing power gets smaller and better, faster. What are your thoughts on smart glasses with education?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly a possibility it will completely replace in-person, whether that's in-person gatherings for education or music or the various other reasons we like to congregate as humans. But I think what's most likely is a hybrid system where, particularly with smart glasses, as you bring up, there's a real opportunity with smart glasses to integrate the physical and digital world and to create a seamless experience that, in my view, is a far more sort of fundamentally human experience with technology, where we're not removing ourselves from the physical surrounding. We're not removing ourselves from other human beings necessarily. Obviously this year is a different, or maybe the next few years is a different case, but assuming we get back to a point where it's safe again to come together as humans, I think there's something very deep in our nature that that craves that, and I don't see that going away entirely, or being replaced entirely with a digital version. But I do think, augmented reality in its truest sense augments our experience. That's a key word there. And that means that, it, in its best manifestation, in a more sort of utopian direction, I think it can bring us closer to other human beings. It can bring us closer to nature. It can bring us closer and in a more harmonious way, or, closer to technology, because there's, technology and our relationship to it is quite fraught right now, I would say, as human species. And so I think that possibility exists, and I don't see it as a replacement so much as truly augmenting and bettering the in-person experiences we already have.
Yeah, that's excellent. And while we're talking about smart glasses, why don't we talk about retail and shopping? Because that's one of the focuses that you have in the fund. What are you looking for here? Is it virtual try-ons? I know that would be one future experience that most retail outlets would probably love at the moment.
Yes. In fact, we are.
The clothes or touch the clothes, but you can virtually try them on.
Yes. In fact, we are talking to a company working on that exact problem right now. That's still in stealth, but doing some really exciting stuff with a virtual fitting room. And so prior to the pandemic, e-commerce was changing the game already. This isn't new. The future of shopping was a rapidly evolving field, and a lot of opportunity there as brick and mortar, started to be a less and less relevant piece of the pie, and that trend has just been accelerated by the pandemic this year. And so I think even if, your example of the virtual fitting room, even when we get back to a point where it's safe to go and try clothing on again and to go into a store, a lot of people just won't. A lot of these behaviors are going to stick well beyond this. And so coming up with solutions that still allow retailers to effectively reach consumers is imperative. And there are opportunities to make systems that are better than ever before. So with the example of the virtual fitting room, right now there's so much money lost and so much waste in returns. A lot of that clothing ends up in landfills, and it's just money down the drain for retailers. And the numbers on this are crazy. I was just looking at some of the analysis, and a ton of clothing is returned every year. And so if we can more effectively on the front end help consumers to understand what is and isn't going to fit, or what isn't going to look right on their body shape, so that we avoid that whole return cycle, not only is that huge cost savings for the retailer, but that's much better for our planet. And so that's one example of where it's not only that out of this crisis we're sort of being forced to adapt, but we can be better than we ever were before as a system. And there's business, there's economic advantages to that, and there's also huge environmental advantages. And so I like to see founders and companies that are thinking that way. That's not just sort of, how do we solve the problems that exist in this crisis, but how do we actually think bigger and beyond that into what's fundamentally broken in this system, and how does this crisis present an opportunity to solve that faster? And that's where I think in retail in particular, another piece is e-commerce right now is kind of flat and bland for the most part. Amazon's the primary example of that. Can you think of a more boring user interface than Amazon? But one of the companies that went through our accelerator, Obsess, out of New York, is building these incredible immersive showrooms where you can feel like you walk into this luxurious Louis Vuitton store where you can pick up the purses and twirl them around in 3 dimensions, and it feels glamorous. It feels like it should feel if you're shopping a luxury brand. And so just the entire experience can really be reimagined, and you could do things that you could never do in a store. You could take someone up onto a cloud and have a light show, and there's just so much possibility in terms of what you could do to delight the consumer and create a really different shopping experience. And I'm excited about that because I think all of us, feeling restless at home and craving experience. I think experiences, novel experiences are what we're missing most during the lockdowns. And VR AR create the perfect canvas on which to build those.
Martina, you've got an extraordinary story there. So well done for putting this all together, and you've got such a great team. I'm just wondering if there's any final thoughts to the viewers that you have. If you're an entrepreneur, I know you touched on a couple of comments before, but give them a couple of tips that that if you're an entrepreneur, how do you approach the market in particularly this emerging tech space, and then finally, if people want to reach out to you, if you can give out your contact information, that would be great as well.
Sure, definitely. So the number one advice I have for entrepreneurs, particularly first-time entrepreneurs, is just to start building and start experimenting. Because I think we, as in our culture, we're sort of conditioned to find the perfect time or feel ready. And this is a trait that's especially true of women. There's some research on how women won't apply for a job until they feel like they've met every single requirement, versus a man who might have a more aspirational application. And there's never a perfect time. I started my first company when I was 25. I was so naive. I learned trial by fire, and it was the best experience of my life. I wouldn't change a thing. And you don't need to quit your day job. If you have a family and obligations and you need stability, start building something in the evening. Start testing your assumptions. If you have an idea, there's always ways, with the abundance of tools we have available today, there are always ways to run small tests and to start building evidence that you are or are not on the right track. And eventually you might get to a point where you have enough evidence that you can attract some outside investment and you can quit your day job. And you're going to learn things along the way. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing process. And I think that's a myth in the startup world, is that, these entrepreneurs come straight out of Stanford and they get millions of dollars in funding and it's off to the races. That happens sometimes. That's not how it happens a lot of the time. And so wherever you're at in your career, wherever you're at in your life, start somewhere. Just there, you can start running small experiments anytime, and that will get you further, to knowing whether or not it's something you should really build out. So I think that's the most important thing. We try to be very accessible as a team. So you can reach out to me on Twitter. I'm just at Welkhoff. Like I said, the website WXRfund.com is a great way to reach us. And WXR Fund on Twitter is another great way to reach us. So we will do our best. We really do watch those messages. And if we miss it for some reason, don't be afraid to ping us again. But we do try to be responsive and available for the community. Fantastic,
Martina. Look, I really appreciate your insights and thoughts and advice for budding entrepreneurs at the end here. So we wish you a very good day, and stay tuned. We'll be posting this in the next week.